Cosplay conventions in 2025 were kind of weird, and I want to talk about it. But before we do that, I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Lizzie, also known as Casual Mod Cosplay. I post here on YouTube as well as on Instagram and TikTok, and I've been cosplaying for over a decade. I've been going to conventions for the majority of that time too, while I've taken breaks some years in the middle. For a while in college, I stopped going to cons. I've been going to cons pretty consistently, and I've noticed some trends in the last few years that I want to talk about. And I know I'm not the only person who's noticed these, because my friends have also complained about them, and I've seen other people online complaining about some similar issues. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy going to conventions, or I didn't have fun at any of the conventions that I went to this last year. Quite the opposite, actually. But I do want to talk about what those conventions were like, because I know that the more that we talk about the issues that we have with cons, as well as the things that we like about cons, the more likely it is that maybe cons will listen to us and improve or get back to being better and the way that they were. Not to be all old man yells at cloud about it, but conventions did used to be better about some things, and they've gotten better about other things. Also, of course, before we get into it, everything that I talk about in this video is my opinion. Everything that I talk about in this video is my experience. If you went to one of these cons and you had a completely different experience than I did, it was the best con you ever went to and I didn't like it, or it was the worst con you ever went to and I loved it, that's perfectly fine. We just had different experiences. Lots of different factors go into whether a con is good for an individual person or not, and my experience is not going to be representative of every single attendee at every single one of these cons. I thought it would be fun to do this video in a tier list format, so that's what I'm going to do. In 2025, I went to 7 different conventions, some for fun, some for work, and all of them were in the Midwest. I don't tend to go to cons outside of the Midwest area. It is too expensive, so I usually stick to cons in the Indianapolis, Chicago, Kentucky areas. This year I went to Lexington Toy and Comic Convention, C2E2, Weebcon Indy, Indy Pop Con, InConJunction, FanExpo Chicago, and Galaxycon Columbus. To make this tier list, I've made a spreadsheet with several categories in which I've described different aspects of these conventions that I'm all going to factor in together before I give them their ranking. They are whether I went there for work or for fun. This doesn't really affect the ranking at all, but I think it's important to you to know why I was there and how that may have impacted my experience. How much it cost and whether or not I think it was worth it. So that is only the cost of the badge. That does not include the cost of housing, transportation, food, etc. Would I go again? Guests and programming, how I feel like those were. Whether or not I stayed on site or if I drove there and stayed somewhere else. How I feel about the venue. How I feel about the timing of the convention as opposed to other conventions, just what's going on at that time of the year. I'm going to go through these cons in the order that I went to them because I think that's the most logical. So they're not ranked, they're not ordered by rank that I gave them or whether or not I was working or they're for fun. They're just ranked in the order that I went to them. So starting off with Lexington Toy and Comic Con. I went there for fun, and badges are about $150. I think that Lexington Toy and Comic Con is worth the $150, and I will talk about why. I would absolutely go again. I would love to make this an every year con. I already know I'm not going to be able to go in 2026 because of my work schedule, but if I could make it work, I would be there, and I'm really disappointed that I'm not going to be able to go to. I think that the guests and programming for Lexington Toy and Comic Con are exceptional. It is very fun. It is phenomenally organized. I wish every convention was organized like Lexington Toy and Comic Con. It takes place on 2 or 3 different floors of the convention center that it's in, and each floor has different activities on it. So like celebrity guests have their own ballroom area that is separate from the vendor hall, that is separate from Artist Alley, that is just where celebrity guests are. And it is the best organized celebrity guest wrangling area I have ever been in. And Lexington Toy and Comic Con always gets really good guests and really unique guests that you don't see other places. I am always super impressed with how well organized things are. And I don't just mean organized in terms of timeline, I mean physically organized. The space is laid out really well. I like that Artist Alley and the vendor hall are separate. And it took me a little while to figure this out, but it's interesting because part of Artist Alley is just a hallway that you walk through to get to and from different parts of the convention center. And I think that's really smart because that means that when you're just walking, you're going to see artists. And I think that that helps, especially when a lot of artist alleys are kind of crammed into the back of vendor halls or with significantly less foot traffic will happen. So I think it's really cool that LexCon has those artists in a high traffic area. Even if it took me a while to be like, why are there booths here? I think that's really cool. I did stay on site for this con, and I do recommend it. I think this is a con that benefits from you being right there, able to just get on the elevator and go. I think that's really helpful, especially since it is in a larger venue. And that also helps you kind of maximize your time because this is a convention where there is a lot to do and you don't have a ton of downtime. So it's nice to be on site and able to just get up and go and start your day there. LexCon takes place in the Central Bank Center, which, like I said, I think is a really good venue for a convention. I like that things are organized on different levels of the con center. It never feels too congested because it is so spread out, but it also doesn't feel sparse and like it's too far away. It's just an escalator ride away from the next thing. But very rarely are you caught in a big crowd trying to navigate. It feels the flow of traffic is very even, it's very good. The AC is never a problem. My only real complaint is that there aren't a lot of great spots in the convention center to take pictures. The lighting is fantastic because there are a bunch of banks of windows, but because there are a bunch of banks of windows, it's kind of hard to get pictures because everything is backlit and also everything looks super industrial. You are very clearly in a convention center. So you can't do really great location shoots, or at least I haven't found a good place to do really good location shoots. I think the food court is pretty good. There are a lot of options for the majority of people, but I know that I have a close friend who has a gluten allergy, among other allergies, and they said they have a really hard time eating at that convention center because there aren't a lot of options that cater to their needs. So just be aware, if you have dietary restrictions, this is one where you might be better off packing your own food. LexCon typically takes place in March, and I think the timing of LexCon is fine. March isn't really peak con season, so usually it doesn't cause any conflicts, except in 26 it's conflicting with C2E2. But for the most part, it doesn't cause a lot of timing issues. It's fine. I think it's a really good con to start the year, and I'm really bummed that I'm not going to be able to go this year. Because of that, I'm going to put LexCon in S tier. Lexington Toy and Comic Con is a wonderful con. I am always really impressed with it, and I'm really bummed that I can't go this year. And we'll be trying to go again in 2027. The next con that I went to was C2E2 in McCormick Place in Chicago. I did not go for work, I was there for fun. Badges cost $150, and I have complicated feelings about that. Usually, I would say C2E2 is absolutely worth $150. C2E2 is the best con in the Midwest, and you certainly get $150 worth of things to do, but I feel like C2E2 this year kind of sucked. It wasn't the worst con I've ever been to by a long shot. My favorite things about going to conventions are dressing up, hanging out with my friends, and meeting celebrities. Those have become the things that I like the most. And going through Artist Alley, although I don't spend as much in Artist Alley as I used to. And C2E2 this year, it didn't really feel great. C2E2 always feels like a networking event more so than a fun time with friends. But this year, it was kind of hard to network. I feel like everyone was really keeping to themselves and people weren't mingling with people that they didn't know, which is odd because the spirit of C2E2 in the years that I've gone previously has very much always been one of, oh my god, you look so cool, can I get a picture with you? You look great. And I've done that to other cosplayers, and other cosplayers have done that to me, and vice versa, and vice versa. There are a lot of photographers who will stop you in the C2E2 skylight area by the big red C2E2 letters. It's called peacocking when you wait for photographers to come get your picture. You stand out there in the light and you look all fancy and you wait for photographers and other cosplayers to come get your picture. And peacocking is fun. It's not my favorite thing. It gets tiring after a while, but I'm always excited to peacock because that I feel like is how a lot of the networking at C2E2 happens. And this year, I don't know what happened, but my friends and I and the other cosplayers that I saw weren't really getting stopped. And I talked to basically everybody I know who went and was like, hey, do you feel like you were getting stopped as much and interacting with as many people as usual in the skylight area? And everyone said no. It almost feels like, and I don't know if this happened, this is my theory. It's a theory. I don't have any confirmation that this happened, but it almost feels like convention staff or the convention itself somehow told people not to take photos in the skylight area because there were plenty of photographers and plenty of other cosplayers there standing around doing nothing, and no one was getting their picture taken. No one was really mingling. Everyone was just kind of standing there, which was disconcerting and really disappointing. And since the main thing that I go to C2E2 to do is network, I don't feel like I met anybody new. I saw some old friends that I only ever see at C2E2, and I had a perfectly fine time with my friends that I went with, but I didn't meet anybody new. And that's disappointing because to me, that's like the most exciting thing about C2E2 is making new connections in this silly hobby slash industry. There weren't really any guest options that I was excited about this year, which is fine. I'm really bummed. C2E2 and Lexicon are happening on the same weekend in 2026, and it's not a weekend that I can go to a con because of work. And I'm really disappointed because they've already announced Christopher Eccleston, and Doctor Who was my first real fandom, and 9 is probably my favorite Doctor. He and 10 are super close, but I want to meet Christopher Eccleston so badly, and I'm so bummed that I'm not going to be able to meet him this year. I wish he'd been at C2E2 this in 2025, because then I could have met him, but it's fine. I never really feel like C2E2 is a fun con. It is a rewarding convention when it works as a networking event. And it is a rewarding convention in that I see a lot of artists in Artist Alley that I don't see at other cons throughout the year. And I usually get some cool art that I can't get other times or other places that are really exciting. And that happened this year. I did have some really fun art finds in Artist Alley. But because it felt so isolating this year, I think that's the best way to put it. C2E2 felt really isolating this year, where the only people that I talked to were the people in my hotel room, basically, even other friends that I went with that I was theoretically supposed to be there with. Because C2E2 is so busy, I feel like I didn't see my friends very much unless we were doing a photo shoot together. And then because people just weren't really mingling in the skylight area, yeah, I'd talk to my friends in there for a couple minutes, but then they would just leave and go do something else, or I would go leave and do something else. I would go to C2E2 again. And I wish that I could meet Christopher Eccleston this year. I want to make that very clear. I wish that I could. But I don't think that C2E2 will be a high priority con for me going forward until a couple of years have passed and I have friends that do go and they tell me whether or not it has improved. I know that cosplayers are kind of frustrated, myself included, about some changes that they're planning on making next year. For example, C2E2 no longer being the final qualifier and then the host of the International Crown Championship is discouraging a lot of people from going and competing. That feels like a big blow. That's one of the biggest draws for a lot of people in my cosplay circle to go to C2E2. Or the new cosplay specific ticket pricing thing that they're doing where you get a chair and it costs $300. I'm really wary to see if they're going to paywall a lot more of the cosplay programming next year. Maybe they'll ticket the costume contest or something like that. It kind of looks like that's what they're heading towards. And I think that's a bad idea. I think rather than generating more revenue for the con, it's going to turn a lot of cosplayers and convention goers in general off and make them not want to come back. So I'm nervous about the direction that C2E2 is going in. And I'm not really happy with the experience that I had. I did stay on site, and I will say C2E2 is a convention where I think it is necessary to stay on site. Not it is better, not you can do it either way. If you are going to C2E2, I think it is necessary to stay on site because C2E2 is so busy, it is so big, and especially if you're a cosplayer, it is the kind of convention where you pack multiple costumes for every day because you're showing off. Again, networking. You want to be seen. You are there to see and be seen, to bring your best, to show what you can do, and to have silly, stupid meme groups with your friends. And so that mix means that you're probably packing a lot of costumes for just a 3-day weekend. And staying on site makes changing really easy. It also forces you to take breaks because you go, oh, my feet hurt. I'm going to go sit in the hotel room. I think C2E2 is a convention where you need to be able to take breaks. You need to be staying on site if you're going to C2E2. That also makes C2E2 astronomically more expensive than other Chicago cons. And with that, combined with the worse and worse programming and the fact that it's really not worth it if you don't stay on site. I've tried both. It's not worth it. I don't know if it's worth the cost. I think McCormick is a fine venue. I like it better than the other options in Chicago. There are a lot of really nice places to get pictures. It's kind of in a food desert. It's kind of hard to find food. With that in mind, the hotels that are attached, I noticed this year, and maybe this is just the first time I've noticed it, but the restaurants and the hotels were pretty good, but also very expensive. As for the timing, it's fine. It's usually in April. Because of how complicated C2E2 kind of has become, I'm going to put it in B tier. Because at the end of the day, a bad C2E2 is still going to be a better convention than a lot of local smaller cons. But C2E2 is not living up to what I think C2E2 should be, based on the experiences that I've had in the past and the amount of money I am spending to get there. The third con that I went to was Weebcon Indy at the Indianapolis Convention Center. I was working, I was a guest this year, and so that meant that my pass was comped, but it did cost about $70 for people to get it. And I do think that it was worth that if you were really excited to see the celebrity guests. They had a huge selection of anime voice actors and other celebrity guests this year, including some people that I was really excited to meet because I'm a huge Evangelion fan, and the voice actors for both Shinji and Rei in the 2019 Netflix redub were there, and I was so excited to meet them, and I had a really fantastic conversation with them, and I was really excited about that. I will go again if it happens again, but I don't think it's going to happen again. The first year of a convention is always going to be difficult, and this was Weebcon's first year in Indianapolis. And they made some weird choices, like putting Artists Alley and all of the cosplay guests in a separate building from the vendor hall. We were in an attached building across a skywalk that I've been going to conventions at the Indianapolis Convention Center since I was in high school. I have never been in this building before. So the foot traffic in Artist Alley and at our guest booths was really, really low because people genuinely didn't know we were there. Because the main part of the convention center, where every other convention happens, was just celebrity guests and the vendor hall. Programming, Artist Alley, and cosplay guests, and a whole arcade, which was really cool, were in a separate building. A lot of the artists left before the last day. I don't know if anyone turned a profit. I don't think it's going to happen again. I know that the con did not make money, and you never do your first year, but it was weird and not great. I had a good time because of the fantastic guest liaison that we had. His name was Ty. Shouts out to Ty and the other guests that I worked with. I got to judge the costume contest, which was so much fun, and I know that my friends that paid to be there did not have a very good time. So keep that in mind. I don't know. Weebcon is a Texas-based con. I don't know what their Texas show is like. Maybe it's better. Maybe it was just the curse of being a first-year con, but Weebcon Indy was rough. I'm a pretty big fan of the Indianapolis Convention Center. It's got air conditioning that works. There are a lot of spots to get pictures where the lighting is really good. It's never super duper crowded. And there are a decent number of food options around. They're just off-site. The food court at the Indianapolis Convention Center isn't great. So you have to be willing to walk to go get food. But if you do that, it's fine. I did stay on site at Weebcon Indy because as a guest I was offered a hotel room. Timing of this con was good. It was in early June, which is fantastic convention timing. With all of that in mind, I am giving Weebcon Indy a D. I had a fine time because I was working and because I was working with cool people. Had I been paying to be there and trying to just navigate the layout as an attendee, I would have been very upset. I think the celebrity guests would have made me fine with the amount of money I spent, but it would not be a convention that had I not been working, would want to go to again. The next con that I went to after that was Indy Pop Con, which is also at the Indianapolis Convention Center. And Indy Pop Con, I have complicated feelings about you. Indy Pop Con was one of the first conventions that I ever went to. I went for fun this year. I go for fun every year. And this year it was $50, and I think it was worth $50. And I know that they are already doing pre-sale for 2026 for $93. I don't think Indy Pop Con is worth $93. I go every year that I can, but I am less excited to go every year. The convention is smaller, and it's just not a great con. And it's been disappointing to watch it just get worse progressively because it used to be my favorite con. The rave was totally empty this year. We tried to go, and it was like there just wasn't a rave. Like we went in and there was music and there was no one there, so we just left. The competition was really fun, really, really well run, and packed with really strong competitors. That was probably the size wise the biggest cosplay competition I've ever been in. And it was so cool to compete with so many really talented creators and to see them showcase. So the contest was really good. Rubber City Cosplay, I think, ran that contest. They did a fantastic job. I don't know how much of that was Indy Pop Con. I don't know how much of that was Rubber City. I did not stay on site for Indy Pop Con. I never do for Indy Cons because the drive is short enough for me from where I live that it's not worth paying for a hotel. Indy Pop Con took place at the end of June this year. I think that's great timing. It's fantastic time for a con. I'm giving Indy Pop Con a C this year. It wasn't the worst con that I went to, but every year it's worse. I think that had it been $93 like they're charging this year, I would have given it a D. But because it was 50, I'm giving it a C. It was fine. I had a good time with my friends. The next convention that I went to was InConJunction, which takes place at the Wyndham Indianapolis West. I was their guest of honor this year, so my badge was comped, but it does cost $50 to get in. And I think InConJunction is the perfect $50 con experience. I go every year. I'm going again this year. I love InConJunction. It's an old school classic hotel convention. It's not really a con for celebrity guests. There are a handful of people there who are guests. I was one of them last year. They're not going to get like your favorite voice actor from your favorite anime or anything like that. It's a very low key con and a very, very fun con for seeing people's handiwork and for talking to kind of old school. I think InConJunction is a really cool way to kind of learn about convention history. It's a really, really, really cool vibe. The panels always feel very personalized because it is so small, so they're very interactive, and the people are always so incredibly nice. I got to run the costume contest this year for the second year in a row, which was really fun, and I love doing that. I love judging costume contests. I always have a good time at InConJunction. There are always people selling books, which makes me really happy. I love getting books. There is always an author guest of honor, and then there's also people who are just like selling used books. A lot of the things that are there are homemade handicrafts. It's a really cool convention. I love InConJunction. If you're in the Indy area, I strongly suggest going, even if it's just for one day. It's so incredibly fun. I stayed on site because I was a guest, so I was supplied with a hotel room. Otherwise, I probably would not have stayed on site because it is close enough to where I live that it doesn't feel like it's worth the cost of a hotel. The venue was good. It's a classic hotel con. Everything's affordable. The on-site food is yummy. It's not the most expensive hotel food in the world, and they have a decent enough variety that you can eat something different every day that you're there. And also, it's surprisingly good for people with dietary restrictions. They have a lot of vegan options at that restaurant for some reason, so that's pretty cool. It happens on July 4th weekend every year, which I think is really great timing for a con because you're pretty much guaranteed that the people who are going to your con are going to have that time off of work. A lot of families might have barbecues or other July 4th traditions. For my mom and I, our tradition is to go to InConJunction to celebrate, and we don't really celebrate the 4th of July, we're just celebrating InConJunction. So I think it's a really great timing for a con. Overall, I give InConJunction an A. It's a smaller con than I usually prefer to go to, but because of the way that InConJunction is, it feels right to be a small con, and I'm always really happy to be there. The second to last con that I went to this year was FanExpo Chicago, which I went to for work. Had I not been working, the badges cost about $100, which is eh, it's not worth $100, but $100 feels a little bit overpriced. I probably will not go to FanExpo Chicago again unless I am there as a guest or they get a really fantastic guest. They do often get really great celebrity guests. That's where I met Cole Sprouse 2 years ago and Neil Newbin, which was fantastic. And I had a good time doing social media promo for them this year. And I met Mae Whitman this year. So they do get really good guests. But the convention itself is not close enough to me for me to really feel like it's worth traveling. To travel to Chicago, I'd rather go to C2E2, even with everything that I've said about C2E2. It's a fine con, but for me, not being a Chicago native or being in Illinois, it's less incentivizing unless they get a really fantastic guest that I'm not probably going to meet somewhere else. They always have a really good guest selection. The programming seems pretty good. I didn't go to any panels or anything this year. The only thing I tried to go to was the rave after hours, which I couldn't find. That felt really disorganized, but that may also have been my fault. I may have been looking in the wrong place. My main complaint about FanExpo Chicago is that the vendor hall is always packed and kind of difficult to navigate. And the last 2 years that I've gone with friends in wheelchairs. It is really difficult to get through with a wheelchair or a mobility aid, which isn't going to impact everybody, but it also kind of does impact everybody because then everyone is super squished together because the alleys like in between vendor booths and artist booths are so small that you're like elbowing people to get through. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Navigating the vendor hall is always really frustrating. And while it's mildly inconvenient for me, it's a genuine problem for my friends who do have disabilities and need mobility aids. So that also is a pretty big kind of ding in FanExpo Chicago to me personally. I don't know how much of that is FanExpo's fault and how much of that is the venue's fault, but it is a genuine issue that needs to be addressed and fixed going forward. I did not stay on site. I had a friend who was kind enough to let me stay with them, so no comment about their on-site housing options. I hate the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center with a burning passion. It is my least favorite convention center to go to, and I have my reasons. One, I don't know if the vendor hall issue that I described is FanExpo's fault or the convention center's fault. The fact that the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center doesn't usually have air conditioning is the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center's fault. I will say this year, the air conditioning was on at FanExpo Chicago, but that was the first time in like 4 years that I have been to that convention center and the air conditioning has been on. And it's really, really, really uncomfortable to be fully in costume, sometimes a heavy costume, full face of makeup, room packed full of people where you're having to elbow people to get places, and also to be like 80, 90, 100 degrees. So the fact that the AC was on this year, I have forgiven the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center for now, but it is on very, very thin ice. If I go in 2026 and the air conditioning is not on, the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center and I are enemies, forsworn forever. But genuinely, conventions being at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center is such a turnoff to me that I will not go to them unless there is a reason, like a celebrity guest that I really want to meet, like a guest opportunity for me, like enough of my friends are going that I want to see them more than I want to not be sweating. Timing of FanExpo Chicago is fine, but the weather does impact the con. Because of all of that, I'm going to give FanExpo Chicago a C. It's not a bad con, and I think if you're local, it's a good con to go to, but I think if you're not local like me, it's not really worth dealing with unless there is a guest that you really want to see. The last convention that I went to this year was in December. I went to Galaxycon Columbus at the Greater Columbus Convention Center. This is going to be really controversial. I had a really good time. I thought Galaxycon Columbus was really fun this year. And as soon as I left, I saw so many like call out posts of people talking about what a miserable time they had. And it was so vastly different from my experience at Galaxycon. So maybe I just got really, really lucky, but I had a great time at Galaxycon. That's not me saying that the people who had a bad time are lying or that they didn't have a bad time or that their concerns aren't valid. I went for fun. I was not working. It cost $150 to get in. I don't think the Galaxycon Columbus is worth $150. It was about $100. I'd say it was worth the price of admission, but I don't think they have enough going on at the con to justify that price tag. I would go again, but if I went again, it would have to either be cheaper than the $150 that I spent, or I would have to not stay on site to cut those costs. I will go again, and I will be excited to go again if prices drop. The guest selection was really good this year. There were a lot of people that I was excited to meet. My husband, who thinks celebrity meet and greets are stupid and doesn't like doing them, was super excited to meet Dante from Clerks. So shout out to Galaxycon Columbus for having someone that he was excited to meet. I met Billy Piper, which was really cool. I was excited by the Rocky Horror guests this year, although I didn't end up meeting anybody because Susan Sarandon and Patricia Quinn both backed out, and also just because I didn't really have time. The programming seemed at least online, like it was mostly pay to enter, which I really hate. And I think, again, is a really big deterrent to people. But then once we were actually there, some of my friends who tried to go to some of the things that, like the panels that I had thought were paid based on what I had seen online, said that they were actually free, but that a lot of people there were confused by that. So it wasn't just me that thought the programming was like pay to enter, but I guess it actually wasn't, or only some of it was. So that was a communication error on the con's fault, and I don't really know what was going on with that, but it seems like the programming wasn't actually all pay to enter. I haven't seen a lot of cons with pay to play programming, and I think that more cons are introducing that, and I think that's a really bad model because you're already paying so much money just to get through the door. Con ticket prices go up every single year, so why would you then also want to pay an additional $20 to go to these panels when you've already spent $150 just to get in? To me, the cost of the ticket is also covering the cost of programming. Celebrity guests, I know you have to spend extra because they also need to make money for their time. That's different. But like a panel, to me, that doesn't feel like something you should have to pay for. That should be covered by you getting through the door. I did stay on site, and I don't think that I would again, simply because it was so expensive. We had a very nice hotel room. It was nice to be able to do costume changes throughout the day, but it was not cheap. I did spend a lot of time with my friends at the hotel bar, but I would have still been able to do that if I was not staying on site. I would have still been able to meet them at the hotel bar. So, I don't think I would stay on site again. The Greater Columbus Convention Center is really nice. The attached hotel, like I said, is really, really nice. And there are a lot of photo spots in those hotels and also in the convention center. And there are a decent amount of food options. But again, it was so expensive and it did not feel worth the amount of money that I paid. I had a really good time at the con, but the reason I had a really good time was because I was spending time with my friends. I will also say that I know people were complaining about Galaxycon's ADA compliance, and I know that they had a lot of issues at the prop table. People were getting their mobility aids zip tied closed, like props. I know some people had medication confiscated, and the convention actually released a statement about that. It was a security team issue that they had contracted out the security team, and the security team was responsible for that. And they have said that they're not going to partner with them in the future and are going to seek a different security team. So I'm really impressed by the fact that GalaxyCon paid attention to people's complaints and actually seemed to have implemented policies going forward to change those. So that's the first time I've ever seen a convention do that. So I'm really, really genuinely impressed by GalaxyCon and their response to that, and I would happily attend a Galaxycon show in the future. Galaxycon Columbus being in December also creates some issues because, especially for a con that is so expensive, it doesn't really feel financially smart to go to a very expensive con right around the holidays because the holidays are really expensive. I had a fantastic time. So I'm going to give Galaxycon Columbus an A, but with some stipulations because while I had a really good time, I know a lot of people had a really bad time and it was very expensive. What are my big takeaways from cons this year? Well, my first big takeaway from cons this year is that you need to check out today's sponsor. Oh, you thought you were going to get the whole way through without a sponsor?
This video is sponsored by InConJunction, who sent me 3 beautiful pairs of colored contacts to try out and review: Flame Green, Siri Blue, and Moonstone Blue. Moonstone Blue are the contacts that I'm wearing for Nico Robin in this video. All 3 pairs are very vibrant and colorful both in person and on camera, and I didn't have any comfort or visibility issues. Use code Lizzie20 for 20% off your order at InConJunction.
My biggest takeaway from this year is that cons are getting so expensive, it's not sustainable anymore. And I and a lot of my friends and a lot of people I see online feel like we're getting priced out of the only hobby that we have. Some of that is because I'm going to conventions that are further away and paying for hotels. And some of that is because conventions have just become so much more expensive to attend in the first place. I know also that part of the reason cons are getting more expensive is because it's more expensive now to rent a venue space. Since 2020, things have gotten so much worse in the convention scene for so many reasons, both behind the scenes that we don't know about, and that conventions and con goers will disclose as being issues that they face. I know that there is a future for cons, but I don't know what that future looks like. And I think a lot of people in my position have a lot of the same issues and concerns that I do. We don't really know what conventions are going to be like in 5 years because conventions are so vastly different from how they were 5 years ago. And it feels like a lot of the changes that cons are making are changes for the worse. And this isn't me saying I'm not going to keep going to cons. It's just that I'm going to have to be significantly more selective with the cons that I do attend. And there are a lot of factors that are going to go into whether or not I will attend a con in the future that maybe wouldn't have gone into those decisions 2 years ago. And that's disappointing. I'm excited for the cons that I'm going to in 2026, and I'm hopeful that I'll get more opportunities to guest. If you've made it this far in my convention tier list video, I hope that you enjoyed it, whether you are from a different region and trying to figure out if your cons are comparable, or you're deciding what cons to go to in 2026, or you had a really standout experience at one of these conventions that I described this year and wanted to know if anyone else had a similar experience. If you want me to make more tier lists for things like this in the future, please leave a comment. If you have any other video suggestions of things you'd like to see me make, please let me know in the comments below. Please leave a like, please subscribe if you made it this far, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I love you. Thank you.